Good afternoon. Welcome to another session of Stockbridge Library's online poetry series. The theme this year is Sparks in the Dark. This program was started by John Gillespie, who in 2020 was the president of the Board of Trustees here at the library. And he wanted to bring a little poetry into people's homes while we were in the initial stages of the COVID pandemic. And here we are in 2024. Still gathering for weekly online poetry. John, thank you so much for that. Thank you also to Joseph Zaccardi, who's joining us today to share his poetry. His sixth book of poems, Songbird of the Nine Rivers, was published last year in 2023 by 16 Rivers Press. And his poems have appeared in Atlanta Review, Cincinnati Review, Poetry East, Rattle, as well as other publication. He has served as the Poet Laureate of Marin County from 2013 to 2015, and he edited Changing Harm to Harmony, Bullies and Bystanders project. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll turn the program over to the two of you, John and Jill.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you, and thank you for the library for hosting. Susanna, we're going to have reading number 150 next week.
Oh,
I know. Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, it keeps, yeah, always fun. Poetry is just, yeah, very nice. So, Joe, we start off every week pretty much the same way. What was your reaction to the theme this year? I call it igniting sparks in the dark, but sparks in the dark.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. It about 3 days ago, because it was kind of going through my head and going, I'm not really not sure how to answer that. But then I remembered I was at a reading in 1997 given by David White. He's a Irish-British poet. And anyways, it's a lovely reading. And he does this wonderful thing where he reads first two lines and stops. Lets the audience kind of absorb that. And he goes back and he reads the first two lines again, and then the rest of the poem. And I thought it was just a wonderful thing. But the bigger story is, as I was leaving, this was in 1997, I heard someone say, Allen Ginsberg died. And I turned around, I was just shocked. I knew Allen was sick, but it just stunned me. I turned around and I couldn't find anyone, so I rushed to my car and turned the radio on to see if I could get any news. And sure enough, it was true. He had died that evening. And so I drove home. And when I got home, I got on my deck and the light was on in my living room. And the comet Hale-Bopp was in the sky. I don't know if you remember the Hale-Bopp comet. It was this magnificent comet.
Yeah.
Lasted probably 20 days. And I decided to read Ginsberg's Howl out loud on my deck. And it was just a spiritual thing for me. And the next day, several of my neighbors, I have several houses that are below me, and they said, Joe, was that you reading from your deck? I said, yes. Anyway, so that was my response to that, sparks of light.
Yeah. Good. So let's move on to that's very nice. And I read David White's book, The Heart Aroused, and decided my job as the CFO of a $40 million retailer. I needed to go out and find my voice. That was it 1997? Yeah, 1997 was a good year.
Yeah.
Good year for changes.
Yeah.
So, I was kind of intrigued by the theme or the whole Songbirds of the Nine Rivers. I'm not familiar with your other work, but what made you, want to embrace that? It's kind of a tour, a little history of some famous poets from Vietnam or Asia. No, it's very, very intriguing. Some of the poems were just short and just delivered a knockout punch. So it was great. So I'm just wondering what made you want to embrace that theme?
Well, it really goes back a long ways. I was in the Navy during the Vietnam War, and on my off time, I would go to the library. There was a ship's library, and I was looking for poetry, and I found this book that was a combination of Vietnamese and Chinese poetry, and I was like blown away because I said, "Wow, every two lines felt like a poem, that you could read just by itself." And then they just kept building and building and building. And so I started writing way back then, just kind of seeing if I could do that. If I could write two lines that worked as a poem on its own, and then just continued. And then I of course became very interested in the history of the wars. As the book kind of tells you, on the Ming Empire decided that what we would consider North Vietnam, the country is called Annam back then.
Yeah.
And they decided it was actually theirs because there were 9 rivers that traveled. So anywhere the 9 rivers went from China was theirs. And that's how that started. It all sort of backfired. Started in 1400, and after about 100 years of war, they decided that they would declare victory and leave. So,
Yeah.
and then everything kept repeating itself.
Yeah.
The North, after China left the North looked at the South and said, "Oh, the country to the South, what we call South Vietnam, was called Kampa," and they decided, I think that's ours. So they decided to invade Kampa, which they did because there was no army. But what those people did is just kept setting up booby traps at night. And so after about 20 years, they decided, you know what, we've already won, so we're going to leave.
Hmm.
And then, of course, the United States got involved. And the same thing, 20 years, we got, communism's going to take it all over. We need to go in there and stop them. And then after 20 years of fighting, we decided, well, I guess we won.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of the long side of the story. But so
Yeah.
I just started writing poems about historically about that.
Yeah, great. No, it's very different from a lot of things that I read. So thank you.
Yeah,
So why don't you share some of your work with us, Joe?
sure. Is this the number of people here? Is it
What's that?
how many people are tuned in? Do you know?
How many people are
Watching?
well, there's only 5 of us here totally.
That's what I thought.
But we get 15 or 20 or 25 people to see
Yeah.
and then you get the recording. Yeah. Part of it is lunchtime is not the draw it was when everyone was home.
Right. Yeah, and it doesn't bother me. I remember doing early readings 30 years ago, and when 3 people would show up, and I would give them everything I could. Excuse me. I think what I'll do is just start with the first poem and just keep reading until.
Yeah.
So the first poem is titled "Poems Teach Us How to Breathe." I go back to the Tang Dynasty poets now and again and daydream after reading their words and touch their red characters with my fingers to understand why their shades of meaning work so well together. It seems to be a consequence of lack and amplitude. The way their poems etched on rock face can be traced onto paper and can mean the spring wind, or the dew lies lightly on the hues of a peach, or there comes a wind and there will be misery. The next poem is titled Li Bai and the Student. Li Bai was more commonly known as Li Po, but lately whoever decided it should be Li Bai. The sound was closer to Chinese. So Li Bai and the Student. He unfurls a scroll of rice paper, snatches up a brush, dips it into fresh ink, scrolls 7 characters. His student throws a handful of sand over the wet surface of the poem, blows off the loose grains, reads aloud, looks up and around at the way the red delta stretches flat. How a lone boatman stands in the stern swaying an oar twice his height. How 3 herons touch their wings to water and dragonflies hover in the rushes. How a stick walker practices among the brown humpbacks of water bison. And beyond, a circle of huts in the haze of wood smoke. Now, Levi says to his student, take this poem, throw it into the current, and watch it sail away. This next poem was kind of inspired. I have a little cabin in the backyard that I was set up to sit out there and to read and write and get away from all sort of noises, except for the natural ones of birds and dogs barking and fire engines. So all sorts of stuff. But anyway, it's Celestial Stems, Earthly Branches is the title. If I could live in the woods among ferns and old pines, I would fill my cabin with blue mountains, sit by a fire and drink from a flagon of wine, and the days would breathe at either end and disappear. What ceases to be is as natural as what comes to be. Dried tea leaves release their fragrance in boiling water. In sleep, the mind scatters briar and blackberry seeds, sows weeds and bean vines, seeds and tares.
Nice.
I remember as a child, I wanted to live in the woods. I grew up in a housing development, but on the edge of the housing development was all this wooded area. It was wonderful. I spent my summers in there, walking around and walking my dog and talking to myself. So it was kind of crazy.
Yeah, where was that, Joe?
That's New Jersey.
Where?
New Jersey.
Well, we lived in Cranford, New Jersey for 20 years.
Saraville.
Oh, Sayreville, yeah.
Yeah. Saraville was quite an interesting place. There was a great clay pit.
Yeah.
This huge pit. And they just kept taking clay from the earth. I recently went back to visit, and it's been converted to housing. So you look down like 50 feet in this hole.
Yeah.
And there's all these houses. Anyway, kind of interesting. But it's nice people there. Well, nice people everywhere. I've often found that. Yeah. So the next poem in the book is called Seed Clusters. The sun is warm and dull over the southern river, while white duckweed parts for a slow-moving skull. A farmer raises the blinders on his dray horse, then rubs down the nag's bay-colored coat with foxglove. He thinks of Ghost still with him, and Ghost gone away. He hears the weave and beat and thrum of bees. The harmony of sounds from times past scatters, then coalesces and gathers, then releases. The clouds are flushed with radiant pearls. There are early crickets that scrape and stop and crick. What fills the ears idles mind and body, and wind goes to wind, and tears to tears.
All right. So, Joe, tell me what were the themes of some of your other books? Were they similar, like kind of geographically historical? I'm just trying to figure out, was this last book kind of a new avenue for you, or is this just a kind of a continuation of some of your work?
It's really a breakthrough. It's really a breakthrough. My other poems were more about current times.
Yeah.
And about affairs of the heart and affairs of the soul.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And I really enjoyed that. But once as I was writing those poems over the years, I think I started in 2008 with these poems. Every once in a while, one of these would pop up, and I just sort of put them in a file, and I took it to my writers group, poetry
Yeah.
group. And, they would say, make corrections for me and help
Nice.
me. But I wasn't even planning on a book. But I got a notice from 16 Rivers, saying, do you have a book? Now you can send it in. It's no charge. So I went into my files and I found all these. I didn't realize I had so many. So I put them all together and I thought, well, what the heck? What do you got to lose? Sent them in, and to my great surprise, at 8 o'clock one night, I got this phone call from one of the 16 Rivers members, and I was already in bed. But,
Yeah.
and they said, yeah, we'd love to publish your book. And I think I said, really? That's great. But anyway, they've been wonderful.
Nice.
I think I asked. Anyway. So you mentioned, John, a poem that you liked. Do you remember?
I gotta find it here.
Okay.
Yeah, this is I'll find it. Just let's see. No, it was, I think it was like a 4-line poem. It just,
Oh, okay.
oh, hold on, it was on the left-hand side. Let's see here. Yeah, we keep going. Foretelling, I
Okay.
thought was foretelling was compelling.
What page was that on?
It was page 52.
Okay. Ah, yes. So I
Yeah,
forgot.
just I read that and it just all of a sudden the last line just, man, just hit me. It was yeah.
Great. So I guess I'll read that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Foretelling. Wu Yun, a Taoist priest, studies the entrails of an ox and shakes his head.
Yeah.
He already knew the omens would be bad because just this morning, the moss in the forest had turned orange. Though he did not foretell, this day would claim him for sacrifice.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, it's quite a turn.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's one of those things. Maybe you don't want to look at the entrails.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Next life you pass on the entrails, and yeah.
Right.
No, that just was like, I was reading along, and then all of a sudden that last line was just like a sledgehammer. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, everything you saw that was is changing or decomposing, and you're going to be part of it. Yeah.
I remember working on this poem. Well, a lot of my poems, I talk to myself. I don't know if other poets do that, but I'll write a couple of lines and then I'll say, and now what, Joe? And now what? What's the next step in the ladder?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I write it. And yeah, and then sometimes I'll write, many stanzas, and then at some point cut back about half, and I'll really find where the poem is rather than a lot of gobbledygook and stuff. But anyway,
So the other one is right there, close to it, page 54. Susanna, like this, The Making of a Poem by Confucius.
yeah.
Yeah, it's another one of these. I think Joe has a tendency to lead you in one direction, and then you don't realize you just walked off a cliff, and you're on your way to have a new experience on the way down. Now, Joe, that's a positive. That's a very positive, because part of it is, no, it's all of a sudden I'm kind of cruising along with the poem, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're going to be a sacrifice today, or hey, wait, Confucius is going to give you some advice on writing poetry. Yeah.
That's great. So shall I read that?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I like this one. Sorry, the allergies out here are terrible.
Yeah.
Not the allergy, but the pollen. Me. Oh, good.
Yep.
The Making of a Poem by Confucius. A mother draws a chessboard on brown paper. Her daughter fashions fish hooks out of old needles. A mouse patters along the skirting board, and a spinner sits before her silk spools. Last chance peddlers cry out their wares. Streams wind and the wind sings. Crows and sparrows return to their nest. Kestrels fasten onto their prey. And dragon kites drift downward, while white birds fade into the hills. Waking in his bed, half filled with light, Confucius said, each poem starts as an iron bar hammered on an anvil into wire, then left to rest in a square inch of land. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just I love it.
yeah,
I feel like we're going back in history. It's nowadays there'll be some AI thing of Confucius sitting up in bed and saying this. So yeah.
yeah,
No, it's great. It's yeah. And some
yes,
great visualizations of every line, a person or some animals or nature are doing something. And yeah, it's all, yeah,
yeah.
just, I really liked it.
Thank you. And this one particularly is, we have, a mother draws a chessboard on brown paper. Her daughter fashions fish hooks out of old needles. And then I go, what's next? What do I have? That's how I wrote it. Well, now what happened? A mouse patters along a skirting board. Whoa, where did that come from? And a spinner sits with her silk spools. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. But yeah, I remember composing that. Okay. Any other requests or?
Well, let's do this. We're kind of when we near the top of the hour, we have a little break
Okay.
for questions or comments, beyond the ones that I'm making. So
Yeah.
Susanna or Barbara.
Yeah, I'm curious about something, and it's a pleasure to hear you read, Joe, because I've, of course, read your books, but this is the first time I'm actually hearing you read. So but I read some notes that you had sent me a while back about the inspiration for this book, and you mentioned your 10,000 strands file,
Right.
where when it's a craft question, really. You cut out parts of the poem and that don't belong there, but which we all do, and we think they'll fit somewhere else, and you put them in your. I've never had 10,000 strands, but I could see there being 10,000 strands, um, and I usually then forget about the strands. I forget to look in the file. I have another friend who's a poet, and she's constantly mining her strands for things that she can use somewhere else. And so I was just curious, like, what happens to your folder? How much of that actually gets put into something else eventually? Or
Yeah, it's sometimes when I'm stuck on a poem, like you said, I go to that file. It happens to be at the top right on my files, so I can find it really fast. And I have it listed as 100 strands, 1,000 strands rather. And I go there, and then I usually take a word from the line I was working on, and then do a search for that word, and it appears all these other little places. And then I go to them and look and see if I can find something that fits. And sometimes something will fit just perfectly, like a peg, and the peg fits right in that spot. Sometimes it just inspires me to write the right line. So yeah, I'm glad to hear other poets do that. It's kind of fun to have all these lines and remember that, wow, this fit in this poem, but it actually had nothing to do with this poem. It was from a totally different era and thought process. But yeah, on my little poetry group that I belong to, I often mention those, don't save these lines, don't throw them away. You never know. You may need a line about a sycamore tree or a blackbird or whatever, or magic. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a
Thank you
lot
for-
in my poetry group too. Someone will say, save this, it's perfect. It's not perfect here. But I had never thought about digitizing it. I mean, when I've done it, I've kept them all in a notebook and then I throw away the notebook. But digitizing it is actually, it's a great idea. And because then, yeah, you can do a word search. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think I'm going to do that.
And it's what do they call it, finding something that you didn't know you were looking for. Yeah. So yeah, it works for me. So yeah, and I hate that. I hate to, you get a good line and and it doesn't fit anywhere, but you don't want to throw it away. It's like you never know. Even sometimes you can, if you're writing a letter to a friend, you can go find that line as a salutation. Yeah, anyway, so let's see. Any requests, or should I just?
Yeah, I'm just going over the 16 rivers because I've been a donor in the past, and actually they previewed your book and the last thing they sent out.
Oh, great.
Songbirds. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. No, they do a nice job.
Thanks. I don't know. Did I mention about the cover?
Yeah.
That's an aerial view, and the 9 rivers are actually there. You'll go crazy trying to count them. So you don't have to do it. Just take my word for it.
Yeah, those the actual rivers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
Totally by
that's
mistake.
cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, I went to a site called Upsplash, where they have all these things that are in public domain.
Yeah.
And then I found this USGS. These are all this was from a USGS satellite photograph. So I saved 16 Rivers some money, because sometimes, the artwork on a cover can cost as much.
Yeah.
It cost, $500, $600, $700, So this was totally free and in public domain. And
Nice.
yeah, and I had them whittled down to about 4, and this one finally popped for me. And I said, yeah, this is the one. And I love, a lot of people, I've heard more than one person say, is that a tree? This big green thing? Well, no, that's a forest. I guess it's a tree. Anyway.
So Joe, what's your favorite poem in the book?
Ooh, well, my favorite poem is actually the last poem. It was one of the first ones I wrote.
Is that the Songbirds?
Yeah, Songbirds of the 9 Rivers. But for it to make any sense, you have to understand the history of what was going on there. But I think, I remember when I brought it to a class,
Yeah.
Tom Santalella, the poetry class, and I didn't explain anything. I just read the poem, and he said, if nothing else, it just sounds beautiful. So if you don't mind, I'll read that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Songbirds of the 9 Rivers. They come in the morning, some singly, some in groups of 3 or 4, one after another. From the high country, from the 9 hills, from the provinces of the Delta where the water is ochre, from the fishing villages where the sea is summer blue, from the 9 hills where the sky runs as long as a river, where the sky is awash in color. Songbirds leaning in the mangrove, a small wind stirring the tops of rice shoots, green as feathers ruffling, the faint stirring of birdsong and a soft wind. The old ones say Laloi carried only creel and net and sword, from village to village, from hill to hill, to the 9 hills and the 9 valleys and the 9 rivers of the Delta. With his magic sword, he carved topiaries of dragons, setting them afire one by one. In red blooms they rose from his torch, grew fierce and winged, and the Ming stumbled in amazement from their beds and fled back to their middle kingdom. The earth's dark patches where dragons beat wildly in the night sky are no more. The old ones say Lei Loi ate only raw fish and rice for 1 year and drank chrysanthemum tea. Yeah, I mean, by itself, it doesn't kind of say much, but it was the end of the battle. The Chinese, the Ming decided to back off and say, you know, it's all yours. We won and we're leaving. So,
And how hard was it to research and find out some of the background? Because you do have, you know, it's like every section, Susie, I don't know if you've seen this, is you know, it's kind of mentioning another poet. You know, some of them from, I don't know, Joe, you tell me. 400 BC. I don't know. They're pretty ancient.
yeah, around the 400s
Yeah.
to about 1400 covers that.
And how easy was it? I mean, was it easy to kind of research and understand the background and not easy, but
I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was just very interested. So any book I could find with the histories of that time, or I found a wonderful translation by William Hung, Hung, of Li Bai and Tu Fu, and it's just a wonderful little book. It's actually, it was my librarian that helped me, my local librarian, because I asked her about to do a search for. I was trying to find it. She said it was the only place to have it was at the local college, and so I went there, and there was a young man who was just kind of, he had to run up 3 flights of stairs to get the book. He was kind of angry at me. So, you want that? So yes, he got it. It was about that thick, and it just had all this wonderful information. So I read it carefully and took notes, and then that led to further study. And then I returned the book, but I wanted to buy a copy, so I went online, and the cheapest I could find was $70. So it's a lot of these books published by universities, they really don't want to give them away. I guess I don't blame them, but $70, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's a little out of my price range. But fortunately, I took a lot of notes.
How did you choose who, like these, who did, I mean, I noticed they're all drawn by the same artist, and I wondered how what made you choose those particular poets?
Yeah, originally I had just photos that I copied from the web, but I realized, well, I can't get permission to use those. It would cost too much, and it'd just be too much paperwork. So I asked a friend to do the drawings for me. But yeah, I just I think I picked many of the main characters. You know, Li Bai, Du Fu, Su Tang Po, you know, etc. And I think she did a great job for me in 16 Rivers, and then charged way too low, actually. But I thank her. And it's just a wonderful. Kate Pepper is her name. She was just a joy to work with. And of course, she said I was a joy to work with too. She said, wow, I haven't had anyone just say, wow, these are great, thank you. Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah. Great. Fantastic. So, yeah, share some more of your work with us.
Sure, absolutely.
Even if it's from a different book, you don't have to, you know.
Oh, well.
You know, whatever you want to do. Listen, it's.
Yeah, no, I will. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, here's a funny little poem I stuck in the back of the book that actually doesn't really connect, but I just liked it so much, and I figured proofreaders and others wouldn't notice that I snuck that in there. So
Yeah, Joe, what page is that on?
sure, that's on page 88.
Oh, that's funny. I just opened to page 88.
Wow, wow. History and
Okay.
myth. Yeah, history and myth. Poor Yuan Wen, second ruler of the Chinese Ming Dynasty, mysteriously disappeared after he sought to reverse the harsh laws and treatment of officials and farmers. Some say he was driven mad for his impiety, hacked off his own limbs, mistaking them for vines. How did he dismember his remaining arm? Let's leave that to the myth takers. Now, what will he do without hands and feet? Why, he will grow new shoots that will twist and turn and bear the fruit that will in turn be crushed and made into wine. That's that. And I was just flipping through my encyclopedia and found this guy, and I read the story about him, how he cut off his own arms. Wow, I've got to write a poem about that. So it doesn't really fit in the book, but as I said, I haven't had any complaints.
So to answer the question, how do you dismember your remaining arm?
That's a good question.
What do you run in? You run into a sword at full speed or
I
something?
guess
Or-
so. Yeah, no, I'd have to leave that to the imagination of the reader because I couldn't answer that myself. Yeah, I mean, how would one do that? And yeah, and actually, if you really think about it, that's pretty deep. I don't, not for me, but for him, how would one do that? Yeah, you're trying to cut off everything that makes you human. Hmm.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So let's see. Page 63. Levi unfurls a scroll of rice paper.
Did you say 53?
63.
63?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Levi unfolds a scroll of rice paper. I listen to a boatman's oar song creak and stroke and touch. I watch a tiger doze in a hammock swagged between two ginkgos. I see green birds among green rushes of the middle reaches, and fishermen using trained cormorants to make their catch. Behind the trees, music rises from the weave and beat and thrum of bees, and the rush of flowers along the bank retreat and surge. Mimosa leaves fold at midnight, and dragon kites drift downward. A few hours pass, and the night's rattle increases. A woman plucks the vermilion strings of a guzheng. What one gathers and scatters is windblown. This is why peach blossoms are always falling. This is why there's a sword in every song. The gods drive their horses through the clouds. I scrawl characters on sand and rock. My mind is full of river travel. My head is full of crows. And the inspiration for that was the last line. My head is full of crows.
Hey, Joe, there's more stuff on page 64.
Oh, does it go on? Yikes.
Suzanne, I want credit. I want a little credit here for poetic editing or yeah. It's all good. I'm like, wait a second, there's gotta be more. Okay.
That's right. Thank you. That's great. Oh, I'll pick up the list. Okay. I'll reread the one stanza. My mind is full of river travel. My head is full of crows. I will fill my cabin with blue mountains and the fallen branches of the willow. At dawn, I will bind bayberry stalks with root thread. At dusk, I will thread red spider lilies into a wreath. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Wow. Huh. Yeah. Mm. Mm.
I like his quote. I like Leroy's quote. We have been sometimes strong and sometimes weak, but never yet have we been lacking in poets.
That's right. Yes.
Susanna, the world is safe. We're good.
It's interesting how, we focus so much on line breaks, but page breaks give us new ways of looking at our poems too. And I found that also, like sometimes rereading something when it's in a magazine, for example, at the end of the page, I'll think, oh, okay. And then I forget that if I turn the page, there's more to the poem.
Well, yeah.
Maybe, and maybe, I don't know if that tells us anything, but.
No, it's good. There's yeah.
Hey, Joe, at your next reading, Susanna and I will be behind the curtain, and we'll like the old vaudeville stuff.
His arms will be coming out.
We'll be shouting out words if we think there's more to be said. Yeah.
So anyway, shall I continue or?
Yeah, go. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to outstay my welcome. Let's see. How about page 61? Walking in the wood toward Jade Mountain. In the green world, there are green birds, and they hop on the tops of lychee trees and eat the sweet flesh. You would not know they were there except for their singing. But if your ears are stuffed full with your own thoughts or the music of daydreaming, they will pepper you with seeds and shake the green light with their green feathers. They will perch on branches of green willow, talk in their green language until you listen. They know all the stories in every tongue by heart and know each word is a gift having more than one meaning. They know the Chinese sound for 10,000 was once the same as the sound for scorpion. To the green birds, there is no difference.
Yeah.
I always think I'm really well prepared, and then I get here and I'm not. It's terrible.
No, it's fun to read along. Usually we're occasionally we'll have a poem in the chat, but this is Susanna, this is kind of fun to be able to read along and listen to him at the same time.
Yeah, I'm liking that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Hey, Joe, read page 46, the parable,
oh, sure.
if you could.
I was gonna ask for a request. 46?
Yeah, the parable. Yeah, a parable. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right. A parable. The villagers wrap white stones in the fronds of areca, put them out in the sun, and the sun comes and goes, comes and goes. And the gods think these offerings are a special dish prepared for them. During spring festival, paper is put in red envelopes in place of money and set afire. And the moon pushes and pulls, and the gods think they have been paid. Again, the gods are pleased. When the monsoons don't come, when locusts swarm, the people blame themselves, not the gods. They ask the priests to burn more incense, to chant louder. The people don't know the gods can act as though they cannot hear, act as though they cannot speak anytime they choose. Yeah. I always remember the inspiration for this, which is kind of far-fetched, but I was at the naming of a baby, Chinese baby, and they get what they call a milk name. There's a feeling that there are evil spirits out there that like to kill babies.
Yeah.
So they give them what they call a milk name. It's not their real name. The real name is hidden, and that'll happen a little bit later in life. So the evil spirits can't kill them because they don't have the right name. So I think that's
Interesting.
I always loved that.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And
So Joe, when did you start writing this Songbirds book?
yeah, as I said, the first poem was probably 2002.
Yeah.
But 2008 is when they started piling up
Yeah.
more quickly.
Yeah.
And I said I didn't really have a goal to write a book. I wasn't expecting that to happen. And the second section, of course, which deals with Vietnam, the invasion of what we would call North Vietnam. That's also from a history book that I read about that conflict. So it's kind of I just basically wrote poems to go along with the history.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I found the character Lei Loi, he was, but like I say, they just can't seem to learn. One country invades and then is repelled. Then the country that was invaded, they invade and then they're repelled. It's just like, it just never seems to stop, War is so wasteful, stupid. Yeah. I don't know.
Nice. I know Barbara is listening. Barbara, do you have any questions or comments? I know you're muted, so.
No, I'm enjoying this just wonderfully. I'm getting information about inspiration and history. So I'm enjoying it immensely. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Let's see. Let's see. I don't think I read this. Page 17.
No, you didn't read that one yet. That's good.
Okay, good. Written on a terrace overlooking two enclosures. White clouds hover above South Mountain River, like crystalline jewels on green treetop shrouds. In a garden of knots, foul weeds and sweet herbs thrive, and strings of blue algae billow on pond rocks. I listen to katydids shrilling in the willows and watch cook smoke swirl above the village below. Birth in morning, death by nightfall is the mayfly's fate. 1,000 years is no more than a worn path, no more than a lifespan lies in its wake. Streams cascade the filament within the well of the world. Every day, poets unfurl, braid words out of their inkpots. Their lyrics about the Orioles make no sense to the Orioles. I listen to a boatman's oar song creak and stroke and touch. There are 10,000 ways to a square inch of land.
That's the second time you used that square inch.
Yeah.
You had that in the Confucius poem. I'm just wondering, is that some kind of symbolic, the square inch? I'm just
the square inch
wondering.
of land actually means everything.
Yeah.
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 It's just the everything. Yeah. It's just,
Yeah.
there was one poem, that I called a cento. I used lines. And my copy editor hated that. Just, you can't use that. You can't use that. It's awful. It's awful. It's awful. So I took the title away, cento, and I took the last line of the poem and I made it the title of the poem, and she didn't notice. So
Oh, boy.
I stuck that in there. Unfortunately, I meant to look that up so I could read it, but I don't think I can find it right now. But it's in there.
Susanna, next year we'll have the first half hour be poetry, and then the second half hour be working with your editor to deceive them about what you really want to do. Yeah.
She was a great editor, really, really was. But I'm fond of semicolons.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have to argue with her. But I would say, but is it wrong? Well, no, it's just not you.
Some people just hate them, you know, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Like, come on. I like long lines, and the semicolon allows me to go on, you know.
I think someone wrote like the semicolon anthology, some ode to the semicolon. I remember someone reading something like that.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious. It was like the semicolon was alive and had like a career and a family. Yeah, it was like I didn't know the semicolon had like all this stuff going on.
Right. Yeah, a dear friend of mine, Rose Black. I'm sure she won't mind me saying her name, but sometimes I would share my poems with her and just look it over for me, you know. And she goes, Joe, this sentence is too long. Why do you have these long sentences? I said, but that's the music. You know, if you keep breaking it, you know, you keep coming to these full stops, period, blah, 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 period, blah, 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 period. But if you can go blah, blah, blah for almost a page before you hit a period,
Yeah.
then you get the music, in my opinion. You know. I don't know. It's fun. I really enjoy writing it. I really enjoy sharing it with friends, and I really enjoy having the poems critiqued. You know, and sometimes, well, a lot of times I'll get good advice, but you have to have the strength. I tell this to people if they ask me. You have to have the strength to believe in your own work, too. You know, just because so and so may be prize-winning poet doesn't mean that they're right all the time. You know. Mhm.
Joe, we get kind of time for one or two short poems.
Oh, sure. Okay. Let's see. Sure. Okay, there's one short one on page 29. Reflections of an old man sitting on a skiff. On one of his travels to a southernmost province in China, Su Tang Po came across a rainbow bridge on a bend in a river. The arch was decorated with jade tiles, etched the character for Kingfisher. How wonderful it was to pass under this bridge, he said, and to hear the willows on either bank touch, then lift away from water. And that's one short one. Oh, we already did that one.
Joe, why don't you read the next page, page 30?
Okay,
You know,
thanks. Okay, here we go. Su Tang Po. I love Su Tang Po's poetry. He's just a great guy. A letter to Wang Wei from Su Tang Po. It's not quite noon, and already my wine bottle is empty. Maybe I will put on clothes to walk in the woods, because I remember when you did that and how it filled me up. Because water cannot sate me any longer, I will avoid the sea. The trees will forge a path, my legs weaken, and too soon to quiet myself, I stop to watch the mayflies and listen to their silence. I will caress the toxic buckeye blooms. Everything seems natural and unexplainable. The lumbering clouds going nowhere come from nowhere. I think of the girl spinning silk and the sweet smell in the village of silkworm cocoons boiling in backroom vats along the path on this day that has grown, on this day that grows too long.
Well,
Oh, thank you.
Joe, a very, very nice reading, and thanks for letting us make some selections. Susanna, we just never do this. Usually it's the poets going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Joe, thanks for being flexible and letting us make some choices. Really
yeah.
very enjoyable reading.
That's
And
great.
Suzanne, always great to see you. So
See you too. Good to hear you, Joe.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, very much.